This is Board President Doyle reconvening the Oregon Board of Pharmacy meeting for Friday, February 9th, 2024. We will now resume session with discussion on package Charlie 6, that's C6, with staff member Melvin.
Thank you, staff member Melvin. This again is related to Division 31 interns, proposes to repeal Division 31 intern rules effective 2/29/2024. The board adopted Division 120 in 2023. Rules in Division 31 need to be repealed to allow Division 120 to become effective 3/1/2024. Back to you, Board President Doyle.
Member Doyle, thank you. The floor is open for board discussion. Seeing and hearing none, is there a motion to move to repeal OAR 855-031-0005, OAR 855-031-0010, OAR 855-031-0016, OAR 855-031-0020, OAR 855-031-0026, OAR 855-031-0030, OAR 855-031-0045, OAR 855-031-000, OAR 855-031-0050, and OAR 855-031-0055 to be effective February 29th, 2024, 11:59 p.m.
So moved, Board Member DeBarmer.
Is there a second? And this Board Member Joyce have been moved and seconded. I will now call roll call votes. Board President Doyle, yes.
Member Chin, yes. Member Beeman, yes. Member DeBarmer, yes. Member Hall, yes. Member Hemmings, yes.
Member Joyce, yes.
Board Member Patel, yes. Board Member Bipperman, yes.
Motion passes. Now move to package Charlie 7, staff member Melvin.
Thank you, staff member Melvin. This proposed rule set is related to Division 41 and Division 110, consulting drugless pharmacies. Proposes to amend 855-041-3000 by striking consulting drugless pharmacy outlets, purpose and scope. And then it proposes to repeal 855-041-3300, 3305, 3310, 3315, 3320, 3325, 3330, 3335, and 3340. And then it proposes to amend 855-110-0007 by striking consulting drugless pharmacy registration fees. Back to you, Board President Doyle.
Thank you, Board Member Doyle speaking. The floor is open for any board discussion with regards to package Charlie 7. Board Member Doyle speaking. For clarification, these rules are otherwise now included in the new rules of Division 104 and 115.
Staff Member Davis, that is correct.
In hearing no other questions or comments, is there a motion to move to adopt proposed? Is that the correct verbiage?
Yes.
Is there a motion to move to adopt proposed rules OAR 855-041-3000, Restart. Is there a motion to move to adopt proposed rules OAR 855-041-3000, OAR 855-041-3300, OAR 855-041-3305, OAR 855-041-3310, OAR 855-041-3315, OAR 855-041-3320, OAR 855-041-3325, OAR 855-041-3330, OAR 855-041-3335, OAR 855-041-3340, and OAR 855-110-0007 to be effective February 29th, 2024, 11:59 p.m.
Move board member Farmer.
Seconded.
Board Member Joyce?
Being a motion and a second, we'll now call roll. Board President Doyle, yes.
Board member Chin, yes. Member Beaman, yes. Member Farmer, yes. Member Hall, yes. Member Hammond, yes.
Member Joyce, yes.
Member Patu, yes. Member Peppermint, yes.
Motion passes. We will now move to package Charlie 8, staff member Melvin.
Thank you, Staff Member Melvin. This is related to Division 41, institutional drug outlet labeling for short-acting opioid antagonists. Proposes to amend the rule by adding that nothing in the rule is intended to restrict or conflict with the directives of 2023 Senate Bill 450, 2023 Senate Bill 1043, or 2023 House Bill 2395. And this one is to be effective upon filing. Back to you, Board President Doyle.
Discussion. Any questions or comments with regard to package Charlie 8? Hearing none, is there a motion to move to adopt proposed rules OAR 855-041-6270 and OAR 855-041-6410 to be effective upon filing?
So move board member Chin.
Seconded, Board Member Joyce?
Has been moved and seconded. The roll call, Board President Doyle, yes.
Member Chin, yes. Member Beaman, yes. Member Farmer, yes. Member Hall, yes. Member Hammond, yes.
Member Joyce, yes.
Member Patu, yes. Member Peppermint, yes.
Motion passes. We now will next discuss package Charlie C9 with staff member Melvin.
Thank you, Staff Member Melvin. This is related to Division 115 pharmacist applicability. Proposes to adopt a permanent rule which relocates and revises existing language from OAR 855-019-0100, removes the provision for interns, and clarifies licensing requirements for pharmacists working for out-of-state pharmacies. Back to you, President Doyle.
Member Doyle, thank you. Are there any board member questions or comments with regards to package Charlie 9?
This is board member DeBarmore. I still think we have some challenge with a task specific to dispensing of a drug to a patient. It was called out about it with the functions of a patient pharmacy being able to, hit different tasks a lot of different ways. Pharmacist and or a technician isn't necessarily actively dispensing that drug into Oregon, but they may be doing one of the tasks associated with, such as you are on that product. They're not actually associating it. They're not dispensing the drug into Oregon. Do we feel this language solves for all that? Call center taking calls for an outpatient pharmacy to take refills, or a pharmacist taking new prescriptions for an outpatient pharmacy. We feel that this solves for that.
Other questions or comments from the board?
Board Member Joyce, so, a question for Board Member DeBarmore, are you proposing an edit? Or would that be substantive? To para 3?
Board Member DeBarmer, I think where I was struggling is we just eliminated drugless pharmacies, and I think that unresident drugless pharmacy was a piece of what was used, and so we don't have a drugless pharmacy status anymore. They don't have a mechanism to register as a drug outlet. On drugs. They're not dispensing drugs into. And so it's essentially they all become independent practitioners. And then we're back to the situation where we were at the beginning of the rulemaking, where every pharmacist would then have to be licensed in order. That brings me up. Understand, but I'm also considering sex issues. Sure. So that's where I am, and I don't know that we have solved the licensing. If that's an interest of the rest of you to solve the licensing. And that's where I am. It was an unintended consequence, I think, of putting the different pieces when they fell all together.
Board Member Vipperman, I like it because I think that everybody who has anything to do with a patient in Oregon needs to be licensed. Because of patient safety, because of people not having a care about what happens to the people in Oregon. I understand that it's an accessibility thing, but we see a lot of pharmacists, a lot of technicians who are licensed here and do business here that live in other states. I don't think it's too much to ask that if they want to do business in Oregon, that they have a license. I have seen, and maybe I haven't been in community pharmacy for a while, but I have seen in my experience, many prescriptions that are brought over from people who don't have a license here and they don't care. And they're incorrect. And they don't care. And it falls on us to deal with that. That's not fair. This makes it fair. That's my stance on it.
So,
Board Member Patel, I also share the same concern as Board Member Devamar. Yes, this definitely going to create access barrier, which is we do not want to intend right now. And I, as a pharmacist, as a practicing pharmacist, I do personally believe that every pharmacist, except there is always exception, but we do care whether we going to dispense to Oregon patient or Idaho or Washington or Alaska or Tennessee. I think every pharmacist care, like, so. Yeah, sure, pharmacists in charge. We have licensed in Oregon, that's fine, but this one means every pharmacist has to be licensed in Oregon, which I'm going to oppose if this is the one is going to be opposed. Definitely have to work on this language bad.
Board Member Cheney doesn't work in your world, so I'm confused about how verbiage said that everybody had to have a license in Oregon. Because I thought this was really similar to what we've had about if you're working out of state and you do these tasks, not the actual as associated, that you still don't have to have a license in Oregon. Only have to be licensed if you're seeing that out of state firm.
This is Board Member DeBarmar. So we just eliminated a classification of licensure that were pharmacy locations that had bodies, pharmacists and technicians supporting pharmacies. They don't have drugs. Supporting Oregon pharmacies that do have drugs. So their call center or remote processing locations. And we just eliminated that group of licensure. Doesn't exist anymore. And so, if you are in now that facility, there's not your no more drugless pharmacy license. And you're not dispensing drugs into the farm, into the state. So there's not a license. They're independently practicing. The people are independently practicing. So this rule wouldn't apply. So it's not it's not everyone. It's just that group of operators who are remote processing, supporting pharmacies in Oregon.
Who oversees those people? Remember Cheney?
I mean, overseas.
So they were in a call, he's in a call center, or you have somebody doing it. Or so. Yeah. Have a patient goes to give them a prescription, they go to Albertsons. Albertsons outsources this to an out-of-state place to do the DUR and the doohickey stuff that you need to do before it comes back to Albertsons to say it's okay to dispense.
So Board Member DeBarmar, it's not necessarily outsourcing, it's their own people. It's just in a centralized location in another location. So
Not necessarily.
they have them sitting all together in a room, or they're what they would be licensed in a remote processing facility. And it's licensed, it, up until now, would have been licensed as a non-resident with pharmacy.
Just went, and then we just did away with that.
Did away with the drugless pharmacy license.
Then what happens to those places that people are doing this work?
Now, all of the people in there would need to be independently licensed. They're
Was that our intent?
Cindy's intent.
Board Member Vipperman, that was my intent because I believe that everybody who has a hand in filling a prescription in Oregon to be safe needs to be licensed. And that's not necessarily, I didn't mean for it to be that aggressive, but the person, I just want to address this, the person that was in charge, the PIC, that was who oversaw all these people who, by the way, in these drugless pharmacies did not have license in Oregon. So technicians did not have license in Oregon. They send a prescription to Fred Meyer. They have no skin in the game. It is up to the Fred Meyer pharmacist if they're doing it or if they're outsourcing to a different one, a different pharmacy. Sometimes the pharmacist in the actual pharmacy never sees it. It goes to a mail order. So there's a lack of accountability for anyone. I believe that. I believe that, and I believe it is a patient safety issue. I believe that.
Member Doyle speaking. Is there a motion to adopt proposed rule OAR 855-115-0001 be effective March 1st, 2024?
Remember Vipperman motions?
For a second. President Doyle will second. We'll now call roll. Board President Doyle, yes. President Chin,
Or, Member Chin's going to abstain because I'm not sure I understand it all. I need a diagram about how prescriptions actually run through all of these different places.
Member Beeman,
Member Beeman, no.
Member DeBarmo,
Member DeBarmore. A minute oppose.
Member Hall, Member Hemmons,
Member Hemmons, abstains because I'm not really sure.
Member Joyce,
Member Joyce abstains.
Member Patel,
Opposed?
Member Zimmerman.
Yes.
Motion fails at this time.
Okay, Staff Member Davis. I want to explain to the board the implication of an opposed vote. The exception that we had in rule that all of these out-of-state pharmacists working for these outlets that did not have to be licensed with us will now have to be licensed with us. Because that is what this rule 3 is allowing for, is people who work for an out-of-state pharmacy and perform these cognitive tasks of interpretation, evaluation, DUR, counseling, and verification that's associated with dispensing of the drug in the state are not required to be licensed. If you don't adopt this rule, it goes back to the statutory requirements that everybody that practices on a patient in Oregon must be licensed with us. So you have, I would say, two options based on your conversation. There may be more, but I'll just give you two. One would be to adopt this language as is, recognizing that it does at least carve out a exemption for all these out-of-state drug outlets that are registered with us. But for the people that Board Member DeBarmore is speaking about, there are consulting drugless pharmacies. There are 22 of them registered in our state. Most of them are not the situation that you were discussing with a large chain employer, okay, that are practicing directly, and those people would now be required to license in our state that were working in those consulting drug outlet. Okay, so they no longer have the exemption. So there is an exemption change. Or you could go back and unwind your motion to repeal consulting drug lists, and you can keep consulting drug lists on the books. And then I think that might alleviate the other concern. So those are the two options I see, but I just want to make sure that you understand by not adopting this language, it goes back to the statutory requirement that anybody that practices on a patient in Oregon must be licensed with the board.
Board Member DeBarmore, I knew there was a consequence. That's why I paused. As long as I did, I knew, because I believe you brought that up last time. That would be the temporary solution as far as unwinding consulting drug lists. That would be a temporary solution until potentially the board maybe introduced another license type for a non-resident pharmacy, just a non-resident pharmacy, period. Drugs or no drugs, potentially, something of that nature. That's not defined in statute. You defined that before, correct?
Out of my wheelhouse.
I don't recall it being in statute. Call it a non-resident drug outlet.
Step Member Akroff, I think one point for consideration, I believe this discussion had occurred previously in public. It couldn't be called a drug outlet because per the definition in statute would have drugs on site, but you do have the authority to register different types of drug outlets within the statute. There is guidance related to how you could register. So I think these are conversations the board has had and is in alignment with the strategic plan to really looking at all of the registrations and relooking at different divisions that needs to occur.
The different license types.
Yes.
Can I make a motion
Yes, you can
or suggestion for a motion?
make a motion.
I would move we on motion what we just did.
Don't understand what that means.
We actually, no, sorry.
Motion, if you want to read motion for this.
So sorry, let me see, let me think through scenarios that were just provided, so we. I think understanding there are several that impact, there would be several pharmacies impacted. And then even more pharmacies does not go through. It would be my thoughts that we would unwind the drugless pharmacy, at least for now, and the intent to correct situation with further conversation. I'm leaving it to you all to figure out how that is, because I know that won't happen in the next 2 meetings. But then move this forward. We have to do one before the other. This is all in this meeting.
So, Board Member Doyle, you're suggesting that we go back to, package C7 and, the change to that? I'm asking for clarification what you intend to, what you suggest we do when you say unwind. Drugless pharmacy.
Spirit as she thinks we should repeal our repeal vote of the drugless.
Member Davis.
The new motion would be not to adopt the rules that, and then the numbers, because you voted to adopt. When you adopted, it was adopting the repeal. So if you were to go back and re-motion now, I'm sure there's a motion that has to be written to unwind what you just motioned. But then after that, the new motion would be something like we vote to not adopt. And that way, by not adopting, you are not repealing. Is that money clear?
Probably not to do anything until after lunch.
Might want to table this and bring it back after lunch so that we can write the motion
So there's a
clean, if that's the direction the board wants to head.
Member Doyle, my understanding, and I had asked the question about rules related to drugless pharmacies being now in different divisions. And do we create a issue, for lack of a better word, by having rules related or held within Division 41 and the books.
If you support one, maybe you supported with this.
Member Davis, we're not repealing 41. 41 is still in the book, so.
And we're
That's right.
we're not
Right,
repealing
yeah,
one.
it's a whole division. We're not, yeah, like, so this has no impact on the new rules that are becoming effective. These rules sit in Division 41, which is not being repealed as a whole, and in 110. And there's no reference to rules that no longer exist in the current wording that is in the rules that are adopted. So it wouldn't have a Jenga effect, shall we say, by not repealing them.
Board member Chin, it was not my intent in abstaining to not have you, staff member Davis explained that now everybody has to get a license in Oregon. That would not be my intent by my abstention, so I would like to bring that back.
At this point, you could make a new motion. So you could say, is there a motion to move to adopt proposed rule OAR 855-115-0001 to be effective March 1st, 2024? If that's what you would like to.
I would like to do that after lunch, after everybody sits on it. So unless you all are ready to do that now.
Board member Bennett, so if you go back and on repeal B9, and the rule that was voted on and agreed to that would be going into effect. I'm confused now. So if you go back and undo the repeal of C7, then the rule that was going to take effect as a result of the repeal would just continue. Would have to change the date because it wouldn't go into effect March, whatever.
This is board member DeBarmore. C7 doesn't have any,
Okay,
it was just a repeal gone. We were removing.
getting rid of it.
Yes.
It wasn't replacing anything. And the reason for now, board member Jimenez, the reason for going back and on repealing it is so that we have something in place because you don't want to approve 9.
Board member DeBarmore, the purpose was the unintended consequence, at least from my perspective. I know that's not, I'm not speaking for the entire board. From my perspective, the unintended consequence was pharmacies that are licensed out of state that would be impacted by repealing that language and that license.
Oh, Board Member Hammond, so what you're saying is you don't want every out-of-state pharmacist to have to be licensed in the state of Oregon.
If we don't pass 115, when we were just talking about, if we don't pass that one today, that consequence would be every pharmacist out of state would have to be licensed. Which I don't want that. We don't want that.
Okay, Board Member Hammond, why not? Why don't we want that?
Well, again, not speaking for every board member, but there's no other state within our country that requires a pharmacist every pharmacist who's practicing to be licensed in the other state.
Staff member Davis, that is not correct information. There is at least one state, maybe two. I know for sure Nevada requires it.
Did that go into effect? Did it actually go into effect?
As far as I know, yes. I also believe Kentucky now requires it.
So, anyways, it is not,
Board Member Chen, sorry to
it would
interrupt.
create access issues.
We had a huge amount of testimony from this is the people who do this work. Talking about the impact that it would have on patient access and not being able to license everybody in those pharmacies, and so those pharmacies would potentially no longer be a viable option for Oregonians. And so if I recall right, there were pages and pages and pages of testimony about why we should not consider that option.
Board Member Simmons, I thought that I've heard since being on this board concerns about not being able to regulate out-of-state pharmacies. So I'm confused as to why we're saying now that we wouldn't want them to have to be licensed. If they're not licensed, you can't regulate them. You can't, if there's a complaint, you have no authority. Am I correct on that? Or that we wouldn't have authority if there are any complaints on out-of-state pharmacy because they're not licensed by the board. So.
Board Member Patel.
So, Board Member Patel, so yes, there's a concern to inspect out of state pharmacy. There's two things, right, in pharmacy. There's a pharmacy, which is outlet, and then there's a pharmacist, right? So out of state pharmacy, they also have PIC, and they PIC has to be Oregon license, right? So there's a regulation there. So we are fine that,
You're okay with the PICs being licensed?
yes, but the pharmacist, like every pharmacy, so let's say there is an out-of-state pharmacy in Arizona, like mail order pharmacy, I think Express Scripts, they have it. So anyway, so they have license, their PIC is licensed, and then there is another, let's say 30 pharmacists, they are working and they are providing drugs to Oregon patient. Now, if you do this, correct me if I'm understanding wrong, or central field, whatever you call, and they all have to be licensed for the pharmacists. And to be honest with you, out of 52 states and maybe only 2 states, I mean, think about it. They kind of require, and no, it's another thing is like I have just 2 licenses in I have my home state is Idaho and then Oregon, plus I have my board certification. It's hard to manage all those licenses too. You have to keep in considerate. There you go. So why barrier,
So Board Member Hammond, so, what we're saying is that we're okay with the PIC having to be licensed. But we don't want every single pharmacist who is working within that out-of-state pharmacy to have to be licensed in Oregon.
Yes, that's the outlet, that's the one thing, that's the one thing. There's another thing too, central fill and just do DUR. So that's the two different things.
Thank you.
Remember, Deborah, she wants to explain something.
No, well, board member Farmer, we've limited it to very particular tasks in this definition that you can do within that licensed pharmacy. So it's not all of the other like consultative things, doing more clinical services. Those tasks we would expect a pharmacist to be licensed in Oregon. So it's when it's related to prescriptions. It's related to parts of filling prescriptions. That's what I'm talking about. Just have parts of that work, but doesn't touch a drug. Spinning out of state, but it is still part of filling a prescription. And that's just, it was just a loophole, an unintended consequence of what we did.
Board member Hammond, so board member DeMarmore, you're saying that you would like anyone who touches a prescription to be licensed in the state of Oregon?
No, I'm saying that's what this allows for, is for that group who's working in a licensed space with Oregon licensed PIC, those pharmacists to be licensed in their home state,
Their home state,
not in Oregon.
that's what this does.
Correct.
What's wrong with that?
That's what I want. But this says you're dispensing the drug, you're touching the drug, right? You have drugs. Drugs and where you are, where.
The mere fact that the pharmacy has drugs means everyone there would have to be licensed.
Doesn't have to be licensed. Okay. You just eliminated the license for the facility where you don't have drugs. But you're still doing parts of the process out of state. Say you're typing the prescription, but you're out of state. But you don't have drugs in your room. You're just typing the prescription. And we eliminated the license for drugless pharmacy. All those people now that sit in that room who are just typing prescriptions now have to be licensed in Oregon.
Staff Member Davis, can you repeat how many of those licenses there are?
We have 22. We have 22 consulting drugless pharmacies.
Necessarily aren't in Oregon, correct?
Yeah, I don't know how many are in the state or out of the state.
23.
Or sorry, 23.
As of
Member Hennigan,
Q1.
look up that information. And we don't know how many individual pharmacists work in each of those outlets. We license the outlet, but there could be 100 pharmacists or there could be one pharmacist that is the consulting drugless outlet.
This is board member Chen, dare I ask, like, remind me of our conversation of why we didn't want to continue that license type? Keep that on.
Staff Member Davis, and I'm looking at Compliance Director Evermock, she has more history. This started before I even came here, but we were looking at reassessing what types of registrations and licenses we issue and felt that the consulting drug list was duplicative with the new rules. Because the new rules, remember, the board worked really hard to extract out that a pharmacist doesn't always work in a brick and mortar pharmacy, right? Like that was the whole point of that rule rewrite. So and now we're talking about pharmacists that don't work in a brick and mortar pharmacy. So the thought process was these new rules now really clearly define for these pharmacists who don't work in a brick and mortar what their requirements are. So there's no longer a need to license them as a drug outlet because they don't have drugs, they're a drugless outlet. And so there wasn't a need for it. But if there's creating this weird wrinkle that we need, then we don't understand the impact. And we didn't hear from these outlets during the rulemaking. So we don't really know if there was impact, but I also don't know that they would have known to write, like, if you don't adopt this, this is going to cause a problem, right? So potentially the not getting rid of that category, leaving it as is, if you look at the language that's proposed in 0001, because they would still be part of a drug outlet, they would now qualify for that exemption. When they're not a drug outlet, they don't qualify for the exemption from licensure and would all have to be licensed with us.
This is board member Chin, so it seems that it would go part and parcel to undo that and to reconsider all of our negative or abstentions of 0001 after lunch.
Staff Member Hennigan?
Staff member Hennigan, of the 23, 10 are Oregon registered building drug abuse outlets, and the other 13 are out of state, with 2 being in Arizona, 3 being in Florida, 2 in Minnesota, Texas, Colorado, Idaho, and Dakota.
North Dakota.
One of the Dakotas. Thank you.
There a motion at this time that anybody would like to propose?
This is. Member Chin is 12:01. Do we want to do motions now, or do we want to have our hour required lunch and do motions after lunch, maybe?
I'm asking if anybody wants to propose a motion at this time. Members have the opportunity to do so or not. So seeing none, we will break for lunch. It's currently 12:02. We'll resume at 1:02 p.m.